All right,
Oh.
so I will call this special meeting of the Municipality of Anchorage Board of Ethics to order. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll?
Yes, Madam Chair. Ms. Swint Pearson.
Present.
Ms. Pallison.
Here.
Mr. Goodstein.
Here.
Mr. Kelly.
Here.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you so much, Madam Clerk. All right, we have a packed agenda today. And so my first question is whether I have a motion to approve that agenda as drafted.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Excellent. All right, we have an approved agenda. So we will start with a discussion of request for advisory opinion 2022-06 before we move into a series of guests that we have for the next 2 items on the agenda. The first of those guests is scheduled to join us, I believe, Madam Clerk, at 3 p.m. Is that correct?
That's correct, Madam Chair. You have a 3 p.m. closed session followed by very closely by a 3:15. The first with a respondent and the second with a complainant.
So those are the 2 guests with respect to ethics complaint for potential violation 22-11. So we have a few minutes. We have until then to discuss the draft opinion that Mr. Kelly circulated prior to the meeting with respect to request for advisory opinion 2022-6. Thank you, Terry, for getting that out to us before the meeting. That one is not confidential, so we can continue the discussion here in open session. Do members of the board need a moment to review that, or are we set to begin discussion?
This is the one that I recused myself from, right? This is, yeah.
Correct. You were recused
so
from this one.
Do I stay? I'm not sure what to do now. Like, is the meat of it done, or do I need to continue to recuse myself from it?
I think at this point you continue to recuse yourself unless and until we've voted on the final product. So I'd say you can just hang out for the next 20 minutes while we discuss this, or we can text you when we are done with the discussion, whichever you'd prefer.
I think I'll just someone just wants to text me. I'll just put my number up on the chat.
Okay, perfect. Let's do that. All right.
Madam Chair.
Yeah.
If I might, I just want to remind you that yes, this is not a confidential request, but your deliberations could potentially be in deliberative session since you're discussing the draft. I mean, I'll let the attorneys weigh in, but I just want to remind you of that. I believe that's an option.
Thank you for that reminder. Would anyone like to adjourn to deliberative session to discuss this? I admit I have largely ministerial edits that I don't think require the board to make the shift to another session, but if others do, then absolutely we should move.
I also have just a few, small editorial comments. So I think if we think we're not essentially going to deliberate, that we can probably stay in open session. Terry, is there anything you want us to deliberate about?
No, I agree. I thought it was well written and the logic was extremely powerful. So I'm not sure what substantive discussion there could possibly be.
Indeed. Okay.
Excellent. I mean, my edits were literally only, I think in the first paragraph, I think the correct term should be municipal public servants as opposed to municipal servants. Like, I don't think municipal servants tracks with the code. Also just sounds a little funny. I was like, municipal servants. Just envisioning like the people from the, like, I don't know, the housemaid being like, and then I think personnel is misspelled in footnote 1. And there is a missing A in the first sentence of the 3rd paragraph on page 2. I think it should be as such specific provisions of the code should be interpreted in a manner as opposed to in manner.
Got it.
And then my last name is not hyphenated.
Oh, got it. Oh, Becky, that means that you're on an old opinion that way. I copy and pasted that from an old opinion.
It is a consistent and persistent issue that follows me in my adult life, and I often query whether I should have added a hyphen, but legally I do not have a hyphen in my name.
Understood. Hey, and where did you see personnel?
In footnote 1, this Mr. Shabaka from personnel complaints by library opinions, library employees, there should be 2 N's and 1 L as opposed to 1 N and 2 L's.
Let's see what we got here. Got it. Thank you.
And that's really all I had. I did think the substance was stunningly well written and very well organized.
I've
I
got
was
an
gonna say,
that helps me. So it's
yeah, I was going to say the same thing. It's really, I think it will be a very useful opinion for the public. So my small editorial comment is the at the bottom of page 2, when municipal employees, qua municipal employees. Can we just say as, just to take the Latin out in case anyone doesn't know what it means? I don't know.
you're talking to the person that used the term Kafka-esque, and
I'm sure it was used to like pinpoint accuracy and appropriateness, but I
which
think
another board member said, I don't know what the hell that means. Like, yes, you got it. Municipal employees as municipal.
that way we can totally disavow the fact that there are any lawyers involved in any of this anywhere. Yeah. No, I think it's a really good opinion. So yeah,
Okay,
we should get it out there in the world.
sounds good to me.
Do I hear a motion to approve the opinion with the edits offered in this discussion and to proceed to have it distributed?
So moved.
Second.
And I vote in favor of that as well. So that we stand concluded with request for advisory opinion 2022-6. That's great news. And we are ahead of schedule. I might suggest, if the board is amenable, that we move into oh gosh, so we take testimony from respondents and complainants in executive session, correct? Not in deliberative session?
Yes, that's correct.
So, but I might suggest we move into deliberative session briefly prior to the arrival of our first guest, in order to just make sure that we are like kind of level set with where we were. We had previously discussed the substance of this opinion, or the substance, our sort of substantive analysis of this complaint, and it may be worthwhile for us to align, refresh, and kind of level set so that we're all ready to go in and make best use of the 15 minutes we have with each of the complainant and the respondent. If others think that would be a good course of action, then I think we should entertain a motion to move into deliberative session to begin our discussion of ethics complaint for potential, or pick up our discussion of ethics complaint for potential violation 2022-11. And I can text Abram and let him know that he should join us there.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, I agree. I vote in favor of that as well. So let's pop over to deliberative session, and I will text Abram now. Back in open session. I see that Mr. Sewell has joined us. Mr. Sewell, thank you so much for your time, and apologies for the delay in us getting to this agenda item. I know we'd originally scheduled you for a bit earlier. We got bogged down a little bit in our previous agenda item. We're now here to discuss your request for advisory opinion 2022-14 regarding your role at Merrill Field, and the role you also continue to serve in with the Civil Air Patrol. So we wanted to ask you here to just ask a few additional questions and hear more from you about the nature of your dual roles and their interplay, and where there is a potential for any possible conflict of interest. And so I apologize, I should have introduced myself. I didn't do that. I'm Becky Wynn Pearson. I'm the chair of the Municipal Board of Ethics. And with me, I have Abram Goodstein and Aisha Pallison, who are members of the board. And I think unless Aisha or Abram would like to start somewhere else, my recommendation would be just to ask you to start to dive in and give us some more details. We have this relatively brief paragraph request. So for me, it'd be helpful to know more about your role with the Civil Air Patrol, more about what kind of issues come before Merrill Field, if it's just that sounds like the Civil Air Patrol is a tenant, if it's just leasing decisions, if there are other decisions that you would make in your role as manager of Merrill Field that would potentially impact the Civil Air Patrol. And then as an extension of that, if there's a route for you to be able to remove yourself from those decisions and still have those decisions made productively. Like that's something we've often grappled with public servants who, can you really functionally remove yourself from decisions where there might be a conflict, or is there no one left to make the decision, or, is there really kind of, is there a practical hurdle to that? So that's where I would recommend we start, unless Abram or Aisha, do you want to start anywhere else? Okay, so I will turn it to you, Mr. Sewell. Although we're not hearing you, I wonder if you're, at least I'm not. Is anyone else hearing him? No.
Yeah. Sorry. You're not muted.
Becky, is there a way that you or maybe Jennifer can see if he is muted?
He doesn't appear to have the mute on. Okay. I saw it. Now you muted. Now you look muted.
You're going to jump out and come back in. Yeah. Okay.
Wow. Well done, Aisha.
I did not hear. I interpreted.
Exactly. That's why I'm impressed. Yeah.
Too many Zoom meetings.
We need some lip reading to happen here.
Is there a way that he can call in if the video is not working? I can't.
Yes.
Okay.
And Richard, if you can hear me, this is Jennifer. The phone number is in the meeting invite as well.
So he's still on as a participant. Is that weird?
Could you dial in via the phone number so we can at least have a verbal conversation?
Richard, I just put the phone number and conference ID in the chat.
Okay, can you,
Okay. Go ahead, say something.
okay, fantastic.
Yes. Working now.
Okay.
Perfect.
So, just a little bit about me. So I worked about 20 years over at the state DOT and Airports Division, and I'm a member of a professional organization, the American Association of Airport Executives. And so I was hired by Mayor Bronson to run Merrill Airport in like last September. So I'm a newbie here. Something I've been doing for about since, I don't know, maybe 10 years is a volunteer for the Civil Air Patrol. The Civil Air Patrol is financially supported and officially part of the United States Air Force. And Merrill Field, and there are, I think, 13 or 14 squadrons around the state of Alaska that do search and rescue. My role is I'm a low level, kind of entry level, what they call a second lieutenant. I assist and work on things for search and rescue. When they take off looking for somebody, I'm like sitting in the plane as an observer, looking for people, and kind of low level stuff. I have no say whatsoever on that side of the fence in terms of any policy, any budget decisions or anything. Let's see, what else is relevant? So here at Merrill Field, there's a long relationship. Merrill Field just had its 90th anniversary, and Merrill Field has a long-term lease. I don't know exactly how long it is, but it's basically $1 a year type lease. It's a sweetheart deal for the Civil Air Patrol. So there's no question about any kind of real financial transactions to speak of.
Could I ask a quick question
There's
about that?
no-
Is that lease something that will expire conceivably in the near future? Is it something that will come before you for consideration while you're in this role? Or is that such a long-term lease that it's like 20 years out in the future and it's probably not worth considering?
I think it's a 50-year lease, I think. And I don't know, but I could find out when that lease will expire, but I just cannot imagine that it would expire when I'm in this job. But I can find out and let you know.
And I think probably our advice would be similar about what to do with that lease, regardless of whether or not, that seems like a key issue where, potentially you might recuse yourself from a decision about renewal of that lease, particularly since it sounds like it is considerably below market value. And so that advice may be the same regardless of whether or not it's a practical reality. I was just curious about whether it's a question that may be something that comes before you in relatively short order or not.
Not that I know of.
Okay.
But I can find out, let you know. There's in that regard. So right after I was appointed to the job, I went to their monthly meeting and said, look, I'm the airport manager on the one hand, but and I'm a member of CAP, but there will be no special consideration for Civil Air Patrol. I treat everybody and all tenants the same, and so occasionally there are these tenant squabbles about, oh, you dumped snow on our side of the fence type thing, and the a lot of times the airport managers role in that is to have everybody go to their corners and play nice. And so, yeah, I don't, okay. So there's all that. Then there's also the number 2 person here is Amy Garcia. She's officially the quote assistant airport manager. And I would kind of explain her role as similar to in the chain of command as an executive officer. She's kind of like takes care of a lot of the operational stuff and kind of internal, and I deal with things like the politics and the budgets and dealing with City Hall and, you know, legislature and whatever. And yeah. So anyway, in fact, the person that deals with leases answers directly to Amy and does not answer to me directly. So that's an important part of this whole puzzle as well. And just as an aside, a famous phrase for airports is once you've seen one airport, you've seen one airport. So they're all different, you know, it's like a kaleidoscope, and they have their oddball quirks and different aspects. So yeah, I can't imagine a conflict coming up, but you know, these things happen, I suppose. But in any case, if there were some issue with Civil Air Patrol, I would recuse myself and just have Amy deal with it. And she's been around, I think she's been here at Merrill Field something like 4 or 5 years. And quite really, while the last spring, the airport manager resigned, and from the spring till about September, she was running things. So completely capable and knowledgeable. And she's at the level, she has an MBA and quite competent.
So I have a quick question about kind of the nature of issues that might arise, because the conflict provision, which you may be familiar with in the code in 115.060, hinges around this idea of official action and of a public servant like participating in an official action where there may be a conflict. And official action is defined as participation in a process, including deliberation, in which a decision or recommendation is reached, and it exempts out, you know, clerical or ministerial matters from that definition. And it's never entirely clear, right? Like, where do you dump the snow? Does that end up being, you know, ministerial or not? But what are some other types of decisions that might come to you in your role that you think might like constitute an official action that could concern the Civil Air Patrol, other than renewal or change to their lease? Is it all this kind of like, you know, what you characterize as kind of squabbles around like, is the snow here or there? Am I getting what I'm entitled to? Or are there other substantive, you know, official actions that you might be called upon to participate in where you could be a question of your, you know, the benefit that the Civil Air Patrol derives from that official action, and whether you have a conflict because of your connection to the Civil Air Patrol?
I don't think so. Nothing really comes to mind. And one of the things that's important about this is that the Civil Air Patrol has been on Merrill Field for a very long time. And the relationship between Merrill Field and the Civil Air Patrol is something that has, you know, they've gotten into this rhythm about how things work. And it's basically, like I said, there's a no cost lease because it's United States Air Force related, and it pretty much hums along without almost any input from the management, Merrill Field management. And yeah, so yeah, and I can't think of anything at all, but you know, these things crop up, in which case I'd wave the flag to the municipal manager and also have Amy step in if there were to be any kind of judgment or call. But again, I don't know of any.
I want to make sure I'm not overly dominating the conversation. Aisha or Abram, do you have questions that you want to ask of Mr. Sewell?
You're
I
doing
don't-
great.
Yeah, I don't think so. I was just kind of along the same lines. I was trying to think of the same way a decision that you might make that would potentially show favoritism. But it sounds like you wouldn't make any decisions really regarding funding for the Civil Air Patrol. The lease is the lease, and then it's otherwise funded by, or funded, you said, by the Air Force. Do you make any kind of decisions like who gets to use, who has priority on a runway, who gets to go places at certain times of day? Forgive my ignorance about airport management. I mean, are those the kinds of things that you could say, well, I really like the Civil Air Patrol, so they get the best runway and the best flight times? I don't know. Anything along those lines?
It's a fair question, and one of the things that's interesting to me and important is that running a public airport is a team sport. There are many players, there are many participants, and one of those participants is here at Merrill Field, they have an air traffic control tower, and anytime a plane moves, the air traffic control is the final arbiter of if that plane taxis. They have to have permission to taxi. They have to have permission to cross from the taxiway onto the runway, and that is all controlled by FAA air traffic control. The airport really is the landlord.
Okay.
And you know, it's sort of like if you've got, I mean, about the only thing is if you have a tenant, just like owning an apartment building that's a noisy tenant or causing problems, all of a sudden everybody's calling the landlord, just to say, can you do something about those guys? And,
yeah.
But as part of the United States Air Force, there's this clear chain of command and clear rules about how they behave.
They're not the problem tenants.
Pardon?
They're not the problem tenants, you're saying?
No, because there's really quite a, like I say, clear chain of command, and if you're not playing nice, you're asked to not participate or to leave or stand down, and so that's they certainly are not the problem child in the family. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. That's helpful.
Well, it is, it's like, well, how hard could that be? I mean, but it turns out that it's very complicated, and there's many moving parts and a lot of players. So
I believe you. Thank you. That's all I have.
Okay.
And I don't think I have
Anything
any
else?
further questions either. I wanted to thank you for putting in the time to ask this, to submit this request and come in and talk to us. From here, we'll deliberate and we will issue a formal advisory opinion to you in response to your request. I would say that I think, likely anticipate that you probably know where it's headed, right? That we will recommend that if there are any matters that come to you that are not ministerial, and it sounds like the primary one is anything significant regarding the lease itself, that you then recuse yourself and from the process as opposed to participating in that process. And a reminder that the description of official action includes deliberation. So that's a question that often comes up. It's not just that you couldn't be the one who signs off on the, the AM or whatever that goes to the assembly about the lease. It's that, meetings to consider what should be done with the lease, or those kinds of deliberative activities are also included in the definition of official action from which a public servant is called upon to recuse oneself if there is a conflict. But this feels pretty straightforward to me, both in terms of the types of issues that, you need to be mindful of, and it sounds like you're already mindful of them. And it's definitely best practice for you to come and talk with us about it and have our kind of validation and affirmation. So thank you for that. We will, again, we'll confer and issue a written opinion that will likely, that will track along the lines that we've discussed today. Is there anything else you think we should know or be aware of before we lose our time with you today?
Yeah, two things. One is I'm actually the person who waved the flag to the municipal manager saying, FYI, there's a tenant, I'm a volunteer for him, and how do we proceed with dealing with having this clear? Way back in the day, I worked for the planning department. And so I'm very cognizant, and of course, working for the state of Alaska, cognizant about, these issues. And so that's one thing. And another is, I really think that in general, when I see a lease, it lands on my desk for signature, and staff has done all the work. And I'm like, okay, where do I sign? So it's not, it would be the rare thing where staff would come to me and say, well, what do you think about, this is an oddball thing. But in general, it just shows up. And for that matter, I could easily delegate to Amy and say, okay, for this, if the lease were to come up, all and signing is your responsibility. So, I think that's an easy fix.
Perfect.
Okay.
Well, thank you for that.
Anything else?
That's all I think we have for you. So thank you.
Okay. Well,
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you very much again for, volunteering.
You too.
Okay.
Right.
We'll talk to you later.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Yep. Bye.
So board members, given that I think it'd be good to continue our discussion of 2022-11 with Terry present, because he was part of the initial deliberations on that, and that we have 20 minutes left, I would suggest we move to deliberative session to talk about this request for advisory opinion and kind of take some next steps in terms of what we'd like to do here with 2022-15, absent objection from the board. And if you don't object, I would ask for a motion to move into deliberative session to discuss 2022-15.
So move.
Second.
All right, I also vote in favor of that. So let's hop over to our confidential meeting to talk about 2022-15. Okay, we're back in open session. Do I have a motion on the record regarding next steps with respect to request for advisory opinion 2022-15?
I move that in keeping with the board's discussion, we ask Paul to Mr. Vesti to draft an opinion reflecting that we don't immediately see a conflict, but with the proper precautions to the requester that he should be mindful of the applicable code provisions and avoiding conflicts and some direction for how he might do that. Yeah.
Do I have a second?
Second?
And I vote in favor of that as well. So I think, Paul, you have your marching orders. Thank you for being willing to draft that opinion. So now I open to the board. Do we want to try and pick up? It sounds like, Ms. Aisha, you have 10 minutes left with us. So we could, at this point, we could take we could either go back to deliberate on 2022-11 or start our conversation on 2022-14 and 16. I think my recommendation would be, let's talk briefly about 2020, about 14 and 16, only to the extent of, like, I think we need to figure out, I don't think we don't have an accept or decline decision with advisory opinion. We just take them. So but we just need to kind of make some next step decisions. Do we want to invite the requestors to come into our next meeting so that staff have appropriate marching orders? So maybe we could have that discussion briefly in the last 10 minutes and then wrap up.
That works for me.
Yeah, works for
Okay.
me.
So I think we need to have that. These are both confidential. So I think we need to, I apologize, move back to our confidential deliberative session link in order to discuss to even have our brief initial discussion. So I would request a motion to do so.
I move to go back to the deliberative session.
Second.
I agree with that too. Let's go. Board back in open session, and I think very briefly we wanted to put on the record the fact that I don't think we need a motion because we're not accepting specifically these requests for advisory opinion, but I think we would request that staff work with the chair to schedule the two requestors for these two requests for advisory opinion to each come and speak with the board, but that we put off the concrete date for that request until we know what is going to happen with the reappointment of board members Aisha Pallison and Terry Kelly, because otherwise we won't really be able to schedule them for a meeting where a board will be available to listen to them. Is that sufficient, Jennifer? Can we just put that on the record as a statement?
Of course, Madam Chair.
Okay, perfect. With that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
I vote in favor of that as well. Thank you both for your time today. Staff, I thank you all for your time today, and we'll see you again next week.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Have a good one.
Bye.